All right, so PRISM. It's a name you've probably heard tossed around, especially when discussing mass surveillance, but let's start at the beginning. Yeah? The whole thing kicked off back in 2007.
That's right. It was born out of the Protect America Act, which, by the way, sounds incredibly reassuring, doesn't it? Like, of course, protect America.
Absolutely. But the reality? It enabled a major shift in US intelligence powers. See, this act led to the broader FISA amendments in 2008, and within those amendments lies Section 702. To cut through the jargon, this section gave the National Security Agency, that's the NSA, rather sweeping authority to collect internet communications of people outside the US.
People outside the US? So we're talking anyone not an American citizen, right?
Exactly. And the reasoning was logical enough. On paper, anyway. Find potential threats, prevent terrorism and all that. But what made PRISM particularly powerful was how it targeted communications like emails, video chats, data that had been encrypted, the really sensitive stuff.
Ah, encryption. It's like the secret diary of online communications, isn't it?
Right. Except PRISM cracked that diary open with the help of companies like Microsoft, Google, and Apple. Through legal means technically, the government could demand data as long as they stuck to court-approved search terms, as laid out in Section 702.
Okay, but this is where it gets, well, sneaky. Nobody outside this NSA bubble even knew this was happening. Like, it was all zipped up and classified, wasn't it?
Exactly. Covert as you like. The program operated in the shadows until Edward Snowden came on the scene in 2013. Let's just say he blew the whole thing open. Suddenly the world finds out the NSA is collecting vast amounts of internet data.
And not just a bit here and there, right? This was enormous. The kind of scale that makes your jaw drop.
Spot on. PRISM wasn't just important to the NSA, it was critical. 91% of the NSA's internet traffic came from PRISM data under this 702 authority. 91. It's mind-boggling.
Wow, I mean, that's staggering. If you were online, chances are your data was part of that collection. And no one had a clue?
Not a clue. Snowden himself described it as dangerous and even criminal. He revealed court documents, slide decks, the works, showing just how deeply the NSA had embedded itself into these platforms we use every day. Microsoft, Yahoo, Facebook, all of them in some capacity. We trusted these companies with our private lives and suddenly, there's the NSA right at the back door.
So, the PRISM revelations didn't just stay inside the tech bubble. Fast forward to 2013, when Snowden's leaks made global headlines, the public reaction was swift and explosive. Outrage poured in as people realised the extent of surveillance woven into everyday platforms. It brought up a chilling question. How safe is our privacy from the very systems we're meant to trust?
It was like a massive wake-up call, wasn't it? The idea that all our online activity, emails, chats, even encrypted stuff, could have been monitored. I mean, it sent shivers down spines.
Exactly. And it wasn't just fear, it was outrage. Protests erupted, governments were criticised heavily, and trust in data security practically plummeted overnight. Snowden's leaks painted a very stark picture of how PRISM operated. Even people who weren't particularly tech-savvy began asking questions about privacy rights and government overreach.
Right, because it wasn't just a few bad apples spying on shady suspects. This was systematic and massive. It involved the platforms we use every day. Facebook, Google, Microsoft, you name it.
Exactly. And here's where things got complicated. These tech companies released these emphatic denials. Microsoft, Google, Apple, all of them went on record saying they didn't know about PRISM, that they weren't just handing over data willy-nilly.
But hang on, there's that little detail. Those leaked documents showed the NSA working directly with these companies. So, were they involved or not?
Exactly the question everyone was asking. On paper, everything was legal. The NSA had court-approved directives under Section 702 to compel companies to hand over specific data. But the public didn't see it that way. To most people, it felt like betrayal. These companies were supposed to be safeguarding our privacy, not giving it away.
And it wasn't just the public kicking up a fuss. The international fallout was huge, yeah? Countries like Germany and Brazil, they were furious.
Absolutely fuming. In fact, Brazil's president at the time, Dilma Rousseff, went as far as cancelling a state visit to the US, entirely after finding out her communications were being monitored. Germany's Angela Merkel was reportedly livid when she learned her personal phone was tapped. Diplomatic relations took a serious hit, all because of PRISM.
I mean, when allies start calling you out for spying on them, that's when you know things have spiralled way out of control.
It definitely sparked broader ethical debates about surveillance on a global scale. Countries accused the US of hypocrisy, promoting privacy rights on one hand while engaging in mass spying on the other.
And yet, it also made everyone more paranoid, didn't it? Like suddenly every government wondered, are we being watched too?
Completely. The PRISM fallout wasn't just a challenge to US diplomacy. It forced a lot of countries to rethink how they approach cybersecurity and, crucially, who they trust with their data.
And with all that fallout, the outrage, the distrust, the global backlash, we're left wrestling with one central conundrum. How do you balance national security with privacy? Because let's not forget, PRISM, controversial as it was, did argue its role in preventing potential threats.
Right. It wasn't all bad, was it? I mean, the idea of thwarting terrorist attacks is undeniably a good thing. But at what cost? The whole mass surveillance aspect, scooping up data from everyday people, it feels, invasive?
Exactly, and that's where the tension lies. Supporters of PRISM argue that the programme was crucial in preventing dozens of potential attacks. In fact, NSA officials testified that surveillance like this had contributed significantly to national security. But critics, well, they saw it differently. They argued it trampled all over fundamental rights to privacy.
I guess it's that age-old question, isn't it? How much freedom are you willing to give up for the sake of safety? And it's not like this was just theoretical. There were real, serious legal challenges to PRISM, weren't there?
Oh, absolutely. After Snowden's revelations, lawsuits rolled in, enough to make any government nervous. One of the standout cases came from the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. They argued that PRISM's mass call tracking violated basic constitutional rights, like free speech and protection against unreasonable search and seizure.
And what about Congress? Did they step in to, clean up the mess?
Well, sort of. Over time, Congress introduced reforms, like the USA Freedom Act in 2015, which aimed to end the mass collection of telephone metadata. But, and here's the catch, programs like PRISM remained active in some capacity. They were restructured, but not completely dismantled. The debate became more about oversight and regulation than outright termination.
So, bit of a bandage on the problem rather than a complete fix, huh? But this didn't just stop at the legal and political stages, did it? PRISM caused a massive cultural shift, right?
It did. The revelations ignited a broader societal conversation about privacy in the digital age. People started to question how much control they actually had over their personal data. Not to mention trust in tech companies, Facebook, Google, Apple. All of them took a nosedive. Before PRISM, the average person might not have worried about who could access their emails or browsing history. But after, paranoia skyrocketed.
It's kinda ironic, isn't it? The very tools that were supposed to bring us closer, social media, email, cloud storage, ended up being the portals for surveillance. And now you've got people demanding better encryption, governments tightening cybersecurity, and this constant fear of being watched.
Exactly. The legacy of PRISM isn't just about the program itself, it's about the cultural shift it triggered. People became more aware and more wary of what they put online. Privacy isn't just assumed anymore. It's something people feel they have to fight for. And the ethical questions haven't gone away either. What level of surveillance is justified, and who decides that? These are questions we're still grappling with today.
Yeah, and it's kind of fascinating, isn't it? Snowden didn't just expose one program. He changed the way the whole world thinks about data, privacy, and even trust.
Absolutely. And on that note, that's the story of PRISM, how a single surveillance program evolved into a lightning rod for global debates about privacy and ethics in the internet age.
Well, that's all we've got time for today. Such a fascinating dive into something that shapes so much of our modern world.
It's been a real journey. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Take care.